Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Identity Security Summit. Especially welcome to our session. We'll focus on the panel discussion about identity security from the CISO point of view. Please welcome our panelists today. Sandra Liepkalns, she's VP Information Security at Choice Properties. We have Faiza Kacem, she had America's Operation Resiliency, Crisis Management Third Party at BNP Paribas. We have Jenny Doe, CISO at CMHC, and also Chris Anderson, Principal at Castlekeep. We'll explore a topic of what do we mean by identity and access management and digital identity from the CISO point of view. We have a couple questions and that we'll go through. We'll understand some of the lessons learned and also some of the things to consider when we embark on the digital identity journey. We'll also take some questions from the chat. So for the audience, please, if you have any questions, post them, and we'll be happy to post them to our panelists. So we'll start with the first question, just to kick off the conversation a little bit, and see with an initial questions about to explore the meaning and the value of identity and access management in your organization. So how does your organization define the value of IAM? And what role does it play in the corresponding area as a CISO? Or for you, Chris, what role does it you suggest IAM should mostly play to enable a CISO role? So any volunteers on that question? Maybe Jenny?
Yeah, I'll get started. So really interesting. You talk about the value of identity and access management. It is our primary control, especially in the context of pandemic. We've realized when everybody's at home, our key control to make sure that people are only gaining access is the identity and access management control that we have. However, it is also the most frustrating control that can be. When you have the control right, it inspires confidence. People, have confidence that you have the right things, that you're doing the right thing, and it works, and your experience is seamless. But you get it wrong, it creates your customer experience nightmare, and you could end up with your worst customer relations situation. So it's a really delicate balance in trying to right size it so that you have an experience that'll make people want to believe in it and to be inspired and have confidence in it. But you get that wrong and your customer experience can just go down the drain. Any other perspective? Chris, Sandra, Faiza?
Well, yeah, I look at it from the perspective it's also zero trust as well, because we're all working from home now, and it's really building our infrastructures and our architectures and our identity management to make sure that people only have access to really what they need access to. And, we've had such an influx of attacks, of spam, of phishing. It's huge. It's multiplied 100,000-fold over the last year, and that's the primary vector. And it's really securing those things, identity management, making sure you have zero trust, multi-factor, the privilege management, access, making sure you have all of those things really, really tight. They're audited, they're monitored, integration into our cloud solutions. It's critical, absolutely critical in the front line and a multi-layer approach to securing our environments.
Very interesting. So we see the multifacets of digital identity from the customer, enterprise perspective, and privilege as well. So it's very challenging somehow to understand from which angle to address. Chris, Faiza, from your perspective, how do you think the CISO should define the value of identity?
Okay. I think that for any financial institution, let's think about that having an access management is equivalent to protecting client wealth. We are doing the gatekeepers to the client health, the client wealth, and the outside world. So this is honestly one of the cornerstones of any digital strategy or any presence online. We cannot go, as Jenny said, as Sandra said, we cannot not pay attention to it. Let's think about the fact that from a customer perspective, access management reflects your care for their security, but also for their customer experience. And I join Jenny in saying that it's a very delicate balance to give a very wonderful user experience tailored to the customer need while dealing with ensuring that everything is secure, is no one is getting more access than it needs to have. So for me, IAM is one of the first thing that we need to think about, that we need to spend time designing adequately when we are talking about a digital transformation journey.
Very interesting. And Chris, you've been exposed to multiple clients, organizations, so on. What do you have seen in the industry with that respect?
Dorin, I can just echo what Sandra and Jenny and Faiza have said. If you abstract at one level, this is about the basic fundamental subject versus object. You know, who are you, or what are you, and what do you want access to? And so it's actually fundamental to almost all business process and security function, like across almost all the domains of what a CISO would deal with. And to get the process right, as Faiza said, you know, there's a lot of unglamorous stuff that has to go on in the background. And to make it elegant, you actually have to get into process analysis and process discipline. And your tolerance for, you know, your quality has to be 99.9 something. You know, anything less, and the cracks in the armor, especially in a multi-step process, either automated or manual, or the combination, will lead to vulnerabilities that the adversaries can and will exploit. And so there's a lot of boring stuff that has to go on in the background to make that work properly. Perfect.
And now, if we go a little bit further now, we said as part of your role, and since digital identity has tangents with so many domains, from customer, enterprise, privileged, subject, object, and so on, what are some of the challenges that you faced when you had to promote the digital identity journey? Where should the organization start, and how you push the agenda to your vision, and what opportunities will we see with the digital identity?
Well, I think, you know, I'll start. I think in our case, you know, we were lucky that a couple of years ago, we actually, you know, two of our organizations merged together. And so we had the opportunity to be able to redesign and start looking forward of how we actually do that. And so instead of dealing with a lot of legacy technologies, we were actually, you know, building net new. So we could actually think about the whole identity access management component, how we wanted to do things. So I think I'm in a fortunate situation where I don't have to deal with a lot of old things, you know, 25-year-old systems. I'm dealing with new. But the new also has its own challenges as well, in making sure that, you know, you're giving access to only the things that you need to have access to. Again, the privilege management, you know, that is incredibly important to make sure that, you know, the controls that are in place, things like the multi-factor authentication, single sign-on, but those, you know, things like single sign-on also create issues that, you know, if within your infrastructure, your authentication mechanism goes down, now you're in the situation where everything is actually down and you cannot function. So it's trying to take a balanced approach there and understanding what you can do to mitigate some of those things. As well as, you know, we're starting to think about as well, you've got the single sign-on aspect, but people also sign up with their corporate accounts on various other platforms. How do you actually manage that going forward? So, those are other things that we're looking at and investigating. How can we actually control that? Because, unfortunately, the password, you use it one time, you use it for more than one system, and it gets breached. Now you have access to your corporate network, even though you have multi-factor. It just sets off a whole spiral of things of how do you actually control that identity? And so those are challenges we all face. And I don't think there's a silver bullet. There's not one thing. It's a multi-layer, multi-strategy approach on how to manage identities as well.
I have to say that I honestly invite Sandra for the fact that she's she's working from a blank page. It's a chance that rarely we have the ability to do. And one of the challenges that I think is in building digital identity or in building an overall IAM strategy is dealing with what exists while trying to figure out what to add or how to transform. One of the biggest challenge is what I call the slicing and dicing. This is the most nightmarish thing that can happen in building an identity and access management or digital identity strategy. How do you slice your organization? How do you understand which accesses are needed for which one? And sometimes you will find someone who has to access several places or have to have several accesses, but he is the exception in the whole organization, or one team is the exception of the whole organization. So what to do? Do we give them a specific profile? Do we accept that we leverage a little bit, we go a little bit higher in the level of the slicing and dicing, and we give everyone this not so least privilege that we want to achieve? This is honestly one of the main challenges that I've seen or I've encountered in all my life of dealing with IAM, is who needs what and how we will be dealing with it, coupled with we already have access. So why are you telling us that we won't need them? So, honestly, my 2 cents on this, it's very difficult to deal with the legacy and the new. And Sandra, I can tell you that you are a lucky one.
I am, but also when you talk about the access, when you start taking away people's access, it's very territorial. And they get extremely offended when you're taking their access away or changing to privileged accounts and segregating things. It's upsetting, particularly, for the IT groups where, well, why do you have to take that away from me? Well, you don't need it. So we're tightening everything down. And so, there's also the whole change management aspect of that as well, because there's the people aspect and understanding why you are doing these things, that it's the best for the organization to protect your data.
I couldn't agree more, Sandra. The user adoption, and we talk about users, but it's really also system administrators. It's really just people adoption. You can design the best system that you want, but unless you have people adopting it and adhering to it, it's only worth the paper that it's designed on. If I think of some of the challenges, I echo the challenges, especially Faiza, that you described. We, in the current environment that I had, we don't have the luxury, while we are embarking on and have embarked on a digital transformation. The fact is some of our core systems still run on mainframe applications. And what you'll see is a little bit of a disjointedness, where you have modern technology that'll take you so far and give you the promise of convenience and ease of management of all these various identities, but it only goes so far. So you still have to rely on manual processes such as quarterly access controls, because you don't have the confidence that your automated process only goes so far, or there's likelihood that it can miss certain things. I was just reading an article that an average employee accesses 10 different applications in the context of their daily work. And many organizations have between, 500 applications to, and especially with cloud apps, over 1,000 applications that they have to potentially have that access to. So when you think of identity and access management at the center as the gatekeeper and having to manage all these usernames or passwords or various mechanisms to gain access and to ensure appropriate access, it's quite the challenge. So having, I really believe in a risk-based approach to designing your digital identity strategy and deployment. It's not only about from the perspective of the customer or the enterprise, but also from the perspective of the customer, what's important to them as they're experiencing, whether they're an internal user or they're an actual external customer. And also from the point of view of hackers. Hackers, they don't know how important an application is to you. They don't really know anything from the outside. All they know is the ability to run scripts and the ability to identify holes and then to dig a little bit further. So how do you mitigate, from those various perspectives, how do you design your digital strategy that'll address the biggest risks or the needs for each of those various quote unquote customers? Chris, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think to wrap up, I'll go back to what we have worked with before, Sandra and Jenny, and I think Faiza and Dorin, you would have seen is the challenge is the legacy, people, process, and technology, right? Actually investigating that and understanding it and getting clear inventories of what it is again one of those very boring things. And as you trip over or you do the work and you find, either on purpose you reveal or you find through surprise or just through the SOC monitoring network traffic, you find users, subjects and objects, users and systems and assets and processes and protocols, and they're rooted in the legacy. And trying to say, look, this is no longer good enough, gets back to your risk point, Jenny. One is the inherent risk, and two is the control risk. If people say, look, I've implemented this system, okay, but is it actually good enough? And I'm not looking for perfect, but is it good enough? And have we defined that and actually got facts and data to back that up, which sometimes I have found helps with the change management. Instead of saying, look, the legacy process is old and the people that want to hang on to it saying, well, I want to hang on to that, I don't want to change. Getting data, which then creates facts about this, is actually helpful in the change journey.
Awesome. It's very compelling to see how we started with the challenges, but actually we explored all the elements of the governance of the people, process, and technology, resistance to change from the organization sometimes because it's from the legacy perspective, it's been working for so long. Why change? Or when at the same time we want to put tighter control. So I'll ask the next question slightly different. So with all these challenges from governance, process, and technology, legacy, moving to the new adoption, how do you think there are some creative ways organizations should look at leverage identity and access management to enable innovation? Or do you think, are there any elements of innovation in things like zero trust, AI, machine learning, all the bleeding edge concepts that are coming that can benefit to the digital identity journey?
Can I?
Sure, Chris, please.
I think yes. I think there's two aspects or two answers maybe to the zero trust and AI thing. One is, in fact, zero trust is not new. It's actually rooted in the basic concepts of access control, the military establishment established in the 60s and 70s and the commercial world adopted in the 70s and 80s, right? So as I looked at understanding this in the last couple of years, and maybe because I'm older, but I said, hey, I'm going back to the Department of Defense Orange Book stuff on how this is supposed to work. And it actually makes sense because we now realize that we're in our commercial environment. We are in, we're not in our closed little worlds and our fish bowls and our businesses and our buildings. We are more than half in the internet, which is a hostile and non-well managed environment, which is what the military says they operate in. So to use these concepts, right, to say, I am going to repeatedly understand who you are and what you want access to is important. And it gets back to what I said before. It's about discipline and process and teasing out the process for authentication, authorization, and accounting. If you look at that AAA sort of phrases that the military used to use, and get that sorted out, right? And AI has a massive opportunity here to help with anomaly detection, and in terms of the identity and the behaviors of that identity, once you can actually tie that all together. And it's been shown, BlackBerry bought Cylance for $1 billion because it could actually do AI on identities and on functions occurring on a box, right? Which can help manage this now literally millions of activities going on within an environment from a subject and object perspective, right? But you can't just buy the shiny object. You've actually got to implement it correctly in order for you to trust it.
Well, I think if I can add to Chris's, you talk about the AI component. It's about correlating the data, but it's about correlating the right data. And one of the things, it's not just dumping every single thing that you have. One of the things that we don't correlate well is we don't track DNS. And DNS is one of the biggest, downfalls that we have. And we don't hear a lot of people talking about that and monitoring. And so, it's really about the correlation of good data, looking for the anomalies, looking at UB, what is out of norm, what is out of context, and looking at those baselines and creating baselines and looking at those.
Yeah, I second Sandra. I think that the key word here is, do we know what is normal before designing or before saying that this is abnormal?
Right.
And this is honestly the challenge here. As Chris said, zero trust is not new. It's rooted in the basis of cybersecurity. It's like we begin by saying everything is not trusted. Now tell me why I should trust you. So yes, there is a new shiny objects, as you said, Chris, that are on the market that are promoting zero trust that definitively help. But the background to all of that is, who are you? Why should I trust you? And if I trust you, to which extent? It's a simple summary, I think.
Yeah. I think that the other part of innovation, like it does bring along the promise of simplifying and being able to use machines to look at a greater volume of data in a shorter period of time. And that promise, will help us to learn what's normal, right? Like the anomalous pattern detection is, well, it'll learn what is, it observes and learns what's normal, and therefore can identify anything that's abnormal. So I really look forward to it. Anyone out there with AI development, like, keep at it. We need it. We're really looking forward to seeing what more you can come out with to identify anomalous activity and to help us identify that the normal activity.
To the degree that you want to inject the AI system into your reference monitor between the subject and object and saying, who are you, and you want access and yes, no, right? That, as I said, that could be very awesome, but it's not a free lunch. So if you're going to acquire a system like that, how do I know that the system is trustworthy? Look at the SolarWinds debacle, right? Like, so if you have a vendor, and I'm not dissing any vendors, but if a vendor says, here's my magic bean, here's my, here's my solution that works. Well, how do you know the thing was built properly and wasn't subverted from the get-go? That's actually part of understanding, like military level, how do I trust the system? Then, as Sandra said, I got all this data. How do I know I fed the right data in it so that it learnt the right things and then could arbiter what was abnormal? So there's all this, as I said, very boring stuff, but it's actually fascinating that you got to do first.
Actually, if I can add one more thing, because we've had we've moved so quickly over the last 10, 15 years when it comes to technologies, when it comes to implementation, and everyone, it's like, it's easy to implement, it's easy to do. Well, actually it's not. Because I come from an infrastructure background, and I always focus on infrastructure, because really that's the foundation that every single thing runs on. And I think in some respects we've lost the security architecture, we've lost infrastructure architecture, we've lost all of those talents and skills, similar to, if you look back 15, 20 years ago, the integrators. We don't have that skill set that people will look hardcore onto how to design the infrastructure, how to design all of these things to make them actually function. We went from a flat network to segmented networks to now it's an open free-for-all in a lot of cases. How do we pull that entire design back? And I see that over and over again. I spent many years consulting, and it's we've got to get those disciplines back from an infrastructure perspective to say, hey, we need to design this right. We have to understand how our traffic, traverses our entire infrastructure, and how we can collect the data, how we can monitor it, what controls we have in place. It's basic fundamental 101 that literally we have to go back to.
Yeah, and as we were saying earlier, zero trust is nothing new. It's going back to that original concept. And if zero trust is, the shiny new word that people need in order to reinforce and to get back to basics, well, then I'm all for it, right? Because the basic fundamentals behind it, which is, why do you need access? Are you an authorized protocol? Even going back to the basis of understanding your application, what protocols, what ports does it specifically need open in order for it to talk to? Like that's going back to basic, security 101. And if zero trust enforces that and promotes that, then it's the kind of promotion that we need to further advance and reinforce the message. A CEO once told me, you haven't heard something unless you've heard it 7 times, and maybe in 7 different ways. Maybe this is just another one of those ways to just reinforce the message of, hey, get back down to basics, understand what you need to have access to, and only grant access to that.
We had some questions from the chat on zero trust, and I think we answered all of those from different angles. We have two more minutes to go, so we're almost at the end of it. In conclusion, dear colleagues, what some of the quick reflections were, some of the lesson learned that you can share with the audience and say, okay, what needs to be avoided? What some of the key lesson learned in a short message that they can share.
I will go. I think that one of the things that I won't go through what we discussed earlier, but one of the things that I think this pandemic teaches us is plan for the unexpected. Honestly, if there is anything that this unprecedented situation showed us, is that we are building an IAM strategy, we rarely think of what is the plan if nothing works, or what is the plan if our hypothesis that we put in place originally no longer stand. I honestly, I personally never thought of looking at the business continuity plans or what else business needs needs outside of a normal situation. And I think that now March 2020, we were told that we need to work from home for a couple of weeks. And 14 months later, we are still in the same situation. How many companies struggled to bring up their critical function? I'm not talking about their normal business, to their full speed and their full capacity in 1 week or two, because they cannot afford to last longer. Often, and now I'm looking at several business continuity plans and resilience plan, the longest disruption that we see in those is like 1 week. What's about 1 month? What's about 14 months? And rarely our accesses or our access strategy, identity and access strategy follows those. So think about the unexpected.
Jenny, Sandra, I know we're over time, but if you have any closing words to share, please.
Well, for me, it's always been and always will be to integrate security as part of all of our projects and do that up front. So, security, privacy is involved, making sure that we're engineering and architecting from a security point of view as well, including, the identity management aspects of it, whether it's business continuity, all of those components. It's really about, and I this is one of my taglines that I always say, it's raising the security consciousness level of the organization. And that means the IT department as well, right? In making sure that, we are security conscious going forward in everything that we do.
Yeah, Sandra, just playing off of that, absolutely. Raise the bar on security, but like build that security culture and risk culture. It's really raising the degree of awareness and focusing on explaining why these measures are important and why it's important to have these things in place. And to raise that risk culture and have everyone, my dream is where I have the organization and business coming back to me and telling me, look, I'm really concerned about this. What's our degree and are we good enough? And just raising that bar. It's so much easier when our services are a pull versus having to be a push. And so just raising that awareness to make that happen just makes our adoption and change a lot easier.
Perfect. Chris, any closing word?
Quick points. I think, as I said, we got to go back to that military grade process that assumes there are adversaries from the design, as Sandra said, to the operation. And so professional skepticism is required, right? And I'm portraying my roots as an auditor and a consultant. But, just to lighten it up, Voldemort has no place here in the analysis. You can't say, I don't want to talk about this and its legacy, right? As soon as you hear that, it's a red flag, right? And there's no Jedi mind tricks. You can't have vendors saying, trust me, my product will save you, right? So just to lighten up, that's just an easy way to remember a few things about being professionally skeptic.
Awesome. That being said, thank you, everyone. Sandra, Chris, Jenny, Faiza for joining this panel discussion. For the audience who joined us, I hope we found it to be insightful. And the panelists, thank you for sharing your experience and thoughts with us. That being said, have a good night.
Thanks, Dorin.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.